Ready to bring your decision making up a notch? You might be interested in learning how to scale your scores. By default, 1000 minds sets the lowest possible score for a hypothetical alternative to 0. But sometimes a situation might arise where we might want to change this. For example, when comparing cars to buy, we might say that it's impossible to have a completely worthless car, and therefore we might want to set the minimum score to something higher than 0. On the other hand, if we're looking at project proposals like we are in this example, we might lose money by funding a low-scoring project. In this case, we might think that a negative score is more appropriate than a score of 0 because the project would do more harm than good. Scaling our scores could increase or decrease the differences in the scores of our alternatives, which could help us find the true value for money of our alternatives. For example, here we might be debating between Proposal E and Proposal S for our best alternative. Both look like they would give us the best value for money, but Proposal E has a significantly higher score, while Proposal S has a quarter of the cost and a much more secure cost estimate. And Proposal S also has a higher y/x ratio, which means that it gives us more benefit for the cost. But if we scale the scores to have a proposal with a neutral impact have a score of 0, then suddenly the difference in scores becomes much greater, and we see that, in reality, Proposal S offers us very little benefit. Good thing we scaled our scores before we made our decision. So let's look at how to do this. In the menu on the right, we'll go to Options and scroll down to where we see Scaling. Here we click on Learn More. This brings us to a brief introduction to scaling and some information about what situations it might be useful for. To begin scaling, we click on Enable Score Scaling. Here we're given a series of questions where we have to decide whether the hypothetical alternatives defined by the given criteria would receive a score above 0, equal to 0, or below 0. Based on our responses, 1000 minds will find a new 0 point and adjust scores accordingly. In this case, we want our 0 score to represent an alternative with a completely neutral impact, so we'll keep that in mind as we go through these questions. Once we're finished, we see what our new 0 score is, and we're shown a chart that displays the original scores and their equivalent score on the new scale that we just created. If we think this isn't accurate or we want to redo it for any reason, we can click on Rescale. Or if we decide that we want to undo the scaling and go back to using the original scores, we can click on Remove Scaling. The scaled scores are automatically accepted, so we can just go back to our value for money chart and the scores are updated to scaled scores. Visually, the graph still looks the same, and the only thing that changed are the y-axis labels. So to make the difference between the positive scores more visually apparent, let's change the settings to set the y-axis to start at 0. And now we see a much bigger difference between our alternative scores. Our alternatives that had a negative score are no longer displayed, but that's okay because we wouldn't consider those in our decision anyway. We can undo the scaling at any time by going to Options and clicking on Review Scaling. This brings us back to this page of our scaling results, where we can click on Remove Scaling to revert to the original scores with 0 as the lowest possible score.